You felt the collapse of the old, and now you understand why. What you experienced was not a breakdown of your character or a failure of planning. It was the forced closure of a structure that could no longer contain the expansion being prepared for your life. While many around you saw only ruin, what was happening in secret was the demolition of what was unnecessary. I came here to explain to you what God has done for you, while the world looked at what you lost. By the end of this conversation, you will recognize 3 clear signs that the divine plan for your life is in motion, even when everything around you seems frozen. You will understand why your current exhaustion is not a sign of weakness, but a redirection of frequency you cannot yet name. And before our time ends, I will share with you a revelation about your identity that explains why you have arrived at this point right now, with your heart open to hear what no one else dared to tell you. Take a deep breath with me. Sit with that for a moment. Let it settle into the part of you that has waited longest to hear this. You have been waking up systematically at the same hour of the night, when the silence of your home feels too heavy, as if something is waiting for a conversation you cannot put into words. You feel a shift in frequency, as if the conversations that once filled your daily life now sound strange, distant, like you are watching a movie whose script you no longer recognize. You have also faced an isolation that was not chosen, but imposed, as if life is removing you from certain tables and certain routes so that you would not be there when the old fully collapsed. These are not problems to be solved. These are symptoms of alignment. Your soul is being pulled out of a place where your purpose could not breathe. If at least one of these signs touched you, if your shoulders dropped at any point in the last few minutes, type 333 in the comments. Your fingers typing those numbers are your spirit saying yes to the truth being revealed now. It is the smallest agreement, but it is real. Type 333 and come back to me. Attention! You need to prepare yourself now. I have prepared material for those who doubt their own calling from God and still do not have confirmation. Are you one of the chosen? We'll give you that clarity. These are the 7 signs of the language of the calling, marks of God in the story of every chosen one, so you can reread your story and recognize the purpose sealed over you before the foundation of the world. Stop calling coincidence what is actually a calling. Stop silencing the sacred restlessness. Stop postponing the answer you feel. Your window is closing, and a chosen one who does not recognize the calling does not walk in purpose. More than 10,000 people have already read the 7 signs and received the conviction they had been seeking for years. They were just like you. They felt something no one understood. They lived in silent doubt, and they discovered it was real. And it had a name. The offer is open only this month. Access the link in the pinned comment now, before doubt steals another year from your calling. The pattern you were following was that of sustaining the unsustainable. You grew used to pulling ropes that were no longer attached to anything. You spent years confusing your ability to bear weight with your life's mission, but the truth is that your human effort, however noble, reached the limit of exhaustion so that you could finally let go. You did not collapse because you are weak. You collapsed because the place you were in needed to be emptied for the new structure to be built. What you call collapse, heaven calls liberation. You were not taken down. You were removed from a path that was leading nowhere. And now, this shift in posture is the only thing separating who you were from who you are becoming. The exhaustion you feel is not a failure of your system. It is the end of your resistance against the inevitable. For a long time, you operated as if the maintenance of the world around you depended solely on your strength, as if every gear in your life needed to be lubricated by your constant sweat. This is the pattern of scarcity, believing that if you do not hold the weight, everything will crumble. But what you call collapse was actually the forced cessation of an effort that no longer served a purpose. You were trying to keep alive a reality that no longer held the life you sought. It is exhausting to try to fill a bottomless well, and your soul, tired of seeking satisfaction in empty reservoirs, simply stopped obeying the commands of fear. This depletion that overcame you is, in essence, your humanity surrendering to the sovereignty of what is greater. Imagine, for a moment, the building of an ark. No one saw the work. No one saw the purpose. No one understood the silence and isolation necessary for that structure to be raised away from the eyes of those who lived as if nothing would change. You have been living inside that ark. The world outside continues its usual noise. People keep chasing shadows, but within you, a silent preparation is underway. You are being sealed against the storm that, for many, will be the end, but for you, will be merely a means of transport to a land you have not yet seen. Isolation is not a punishment, it is the preservation of the lineage that must arrive whole on the other side. You have been placed in a safe place, where your frequency is protected from the influences that tried to divert your course, and this silence is the waiting room of your destiny. If something inside you just sealed itself, if the image of the ark I showed you landed in a place you cannot explain, type the words, "I am awake," in the comments. Let the recognition seal where it just landed. The act of typing those words makes the witness permanent in your own record. Type, and come back to me. When divine protection finally becomes visible, the collapse of the old ceases to be a tragedy and becomes evidence. It is as if the fog lifts, and you can see, with a clarity bordering on discomfort, that everything you lost or had to abandon was actually dead weight thrown overboard, so your vessel could float. From this moment on, a reversal of logic occurs. You stop fighting for doors to open and begin to realize that the keys you were seeking were already in your hands, but you were too busy holding the latch from the outside. What comes now, in the deeper layer, is the understanding that your life is no longer about what you do, but about what you allow to be done through you. Stay with me, because the revelation of how to sustain this state of readiness is what we will uncover now. Take a deep breath with me. Feel the weight on your shoulders lifting as these words find their place. If something in this message confirmed what your spirit already knew, let your like be your wordless amen. Not as a metric of a system, but as a deep agreement that what was named here was named correctly, acknowledging the truth you carried in silence for so long. Sit with that for a moment. There is someone in your life who needs this exact message right now. Someone who has been striving harder than everyone around and still sees the door stay closed. Someone who walks quietly in a way that no one around can explain. Someone who carries a tiredness that physical rest cannot heal. A face just appeared in your mind as I spoke, didn't it? Send this to that person, not as a recommendation, but as a delivery, as a notice that the crossing is protected and that what they hold in secret will not go unnoticed. Before this ends, type the words "I am the chosen one" in the comments, not as a wish, not as a hope, but as a confirmation. The agreement that has been forming in silence between heaven and your hearing is an agreement from which you will live for the rest of this season. Type slowly. Let your fingers do what your spirit is already doing. What once looked like a flaw in your structure, what you interpreted as a detour or a loss of rhythm, was actually the necessary crumbling for new ground to be revealed. You have felt like someone walking on shifting soil, but what you did not realize is that the soil is shifting to mold itself to your feet, not to topple you. I am telling you that this movement is not a punishment. It is a marking of territory. There are 3 clear signs that God's plan for you is fully in motion, even when everything around seems still. The first is a deep strangeness with places that once brought you comfort. You enter familiar environments and feel a dissonance, a silence that screams that this is no longer your destination. The second is the sudden interruption of cycles that seemed eternal, as if an invisible hand flipped the switch on connections that only drained your vital energy. And the third, perhaps the most telling, is your constant need for withdrawal, a desire for isolation that does not come from sadness, but from a search for a frequency you know you will only find in silence. It is the smallest agreement, but it is real. It is the record that you are no longer operating outside of your own history. You have been operating under a pattern of exhaustion that was not yours, carrying the weight of expectations never designed for your back. It is the human effort trying to force open a door that only moves by the touch of purpose. You exhausted yourself trying to be who they said you should be, but this fatigue is not a lack of faith. It is the depletion of your ego before the approaching truth. Stop pulling ropes that are attached to nothing. Your tiredness is, in fact, the signaling that your limit has been reached so that the higher power could finally take command. Imagine now the metaphor of the ark. While the world outside stirs and loses itself in storms of opinion and noise, you have been going through a time of silent preparation. The ark was not built for comfort. It was built for the crossing. You have felt contained, guarded, almost forgotten in a waiting space. But it is precisely in this containment that you are being sealed against external influence. What you are living through is not abandonment, it is shielding. What you hold today, in the secret of your heart, is what will sustain your life when the storm finally passes. If something inside you just sealed itself, if this image of the ark landed in a place you cannot explain, type the words, "I am awake," in the comments. Type and come back to me. But there is something almost no one understands about this transition process. Divine protection, when it finally becomes visible, does not look like a shield of light. It looks like the complete removal of obstacles you did not even know were there. The peace you begin to feel is not the peace of one who won a war. It is the peace of one who realized the war was never against you. It is the calm of one who saw the desert open for the lineage to pass through, not as a metric, but as an agreement that what was named here was named correctly, as a recognition that the layers of your truth are finally aligning with the original intention. Someone who has been striving much harder than everyone around and still sees the door stay closed, even with the sweat they pour. Someone who walks quietly in a way that no one around can explain, carrying a weight that is not visible but alters the heaviness of their very walk. Someone whose face just appeared in your mind as I spoke, that countenance that reflects the same silent search you recognize in yourself. Send this to that person. Not as a recommendation, not as content, but as a delivery, a notice that they have not been forgotten, and that what they feel is real. Take a deep breath with me now. Let the air fill that space where doubt used to dwell. Before we close this meeting, type the words, "I am the chosen one," in the comments. Not as a wish, not as a hope you toss to the wind, but as a solemn confirmation. The agreement that has been forming in silence between heaven and your hearing is a pact from which you will live for the rest of this season. Type slowly. Feel the weight of each letter. Let your fingers do what your spirit has been doing since the very first moment of this conversation. You felt the collapse of the old. That moment when the structure you built with so much effort simply gave way, leaving you in a void that seemed threatening, but which today you begin to understand as the only way God could open a path. What looked like defeat now reveals itself as a necessary demolition, so the new could be built on a foundation not made of sand or others' approval. You are here because something inside you recognized that this collapse was not a punishment. It was an intervention. I came today to confirm that you did not lose control. You lost your chains. So that you can understand exactly what is happening in your life right now, let us establish a covenant of revelation. By the end of this conversation, you will recognize the 3 clear signs that the higher plan for your life is fully in motion, even when everything around seems still. You will understand why the isolation you have lived through is not abandonment, but strategic preparation for what you cannot yet see, but have begun to feel. And before we finish, there is a revelation about your spiritual lineage that explains why you never felt part of the crowd and why your journey has always demanded a cost that no one else seems willing to pay. The first layer of this recognition is in the signs you have ignored for fear of seeming unbalanced. You have been waking at the same instant of the night, exactly when the silence is so dense it sounds like a voice. Have you noticed how conversations that were once your safe harbor now sound like empty noise? Do you notice how numbers repeat before your eyes, as if the very fabric of reality is trying to call your attention to a different frequency than the one the world usually tunes into? This is not coincidence, and it is not a failure of perception. It is calibration. Your being is being adjusted to a vibration that can no longer accommodate the level of noise you once lived in. It is the smallest agreement, but it is real. It is the mark of your presence in the experience we are having now. Now, we must go deeper. What you have called exhaustion is, in fact, the end of your dependence on human effort. You spent years trying to pull ropes that were no longer attached to anything. You presented yourself to audiences that were never paying attention to who you really are, only to how you could be useful to them. This pattern of trying to bear the world's weight on your shoulders, believing that your faithfulness would be measured by your suffering, is what is being dismantled right now. God does not want your slave sweat. He wants your readiness as a child. Imagine now the metaphor of the ark. For a long time, you felt like someone placed inside a structure that seemed small, isolated and silent, while outside the world continued its usual noise. You felt ignored, forgotten, perhaps even punished for being taken off stage. But the ark is not a place of punishment. The ark is where what is precious is preserved, while the storm resolves the matters you would not have had the strength to face alone. While you were inside there, in silence, what needed to be cleansed was being washed away. What needed to be drowned no longer has power over you. You were not idle. You were being kept for the moment of disembarkation. If the revelation of this ark made sense, if the image of this isolation as protection landed in a place you could not explain, type the words, "I am awake," in the comments. Let that recognition seal where it just landed inside your chest. Type and come back to me. What happens now when this divine protection becomes visible and the door begins to open? You cease to be the one chasing crumbs and become the one walking on the promise. The anxiety you carried about the future loses its grip because you have finally understood that the script is not yours. You are the protagonist of a story that was already written with your victory in mind. You stop explaining, stop justifying yourself to those who lack the capacity to understand your frequency. You begin to live from your identity, no longer from your circumstances. If something in this conversation confirmed what your spirit already knew, let your like be your wordless amen. Not as a metric, nor as data for the outside world, but as a deep agreement that what was named here is the truth about your walk. Every movement of yours, every clear intention, now aligns with what you were designed to be since before the foundation of what you know as reality. There is a clarity that emerges only after the excess is removed from the scene. Perhaps you have felt, in recent weeks, a strange difficulty in maintaining the rhythm that once seemed natural. Tasks that used to take minutes now seem to demand an energy you simply cannot mobilize. Many would call this discouragement or loss of focus, but what you are experiencing is the removal of your false supports. Your spirit is no longer willing to sustain structures that no longer serve your purpose. The collapse of your old way of living was not a mistake. It was the necessary dismantling, so the new could find space where the old insisted on occupying. There is a person in your life you can see right now. Perhaps their face came to you while I spoke about the need to release what weighs down. It is someone who has been striving silently, someone who walks with visible tiredness, someone who holds their head high even when no one notices the internal storm they carry. That person needs to hear that their effort is not in vain, and that their silence is, in fact, a preparation. Do not keep this delivery only for yourself. Send this to them, as one delivers a map to someone lost in the dark. Send it as a bridge between what they are living and the peace they do not yet understand is already theirs. Take a deep breath. Feel the gravity of this moment. What you carry is a seal of authenticity that time cannot erase. Do not do it as a request for validation, but as a signature on a contract you are making with your own existence. Feel the strength that emanates as you write each letter. Let this movement of your fingers record in the physical plane the firmness your spirit has already reached in the higher dimension. One who surrenders to detachment discovers that scarcity was only the reflection of a reservoir that needed to be emptied before the new flood. You spent too much time trying to organize the pieces of a puzzle that no longer belonged to you. Each time you tried to force the fit, you felt that sharp resistance. That ache in your soul that insisted on reminding you that your place was not there. What you call collapse, the wisdom that guides you calls liberation. It is like the falling of dry leaves when winter approaches. They must give way for the new sap to rise and life to renew. It is not abandonment, it is a transition that occurs at the level of frequency. When you understand that human effort has a limit, you finally realize that true strength does not reside in frantic doing, but in allowing your purpose to manifest. What you have been sustaining alone, out of sheer loyalty to a past that no longer serves you, now begins to release from your shoulders. This relief does not come from external achievement. It comes from the acceptance that your value never depended on how much you carried, but on how much you allowed the light to pass through your own form. The conversations around you, the noises of routine, and the expectations of people who surround you seem increasingly distant, not because you have become insensitive, but because you are finally hearing the frequency that was always beneath all that noise. Your silence is now a weapon of protection against the dispersion of your vital energy. While the world outside stirs trying to prove something, you withdraw to the only place where your truth remains unchanged. The peace you seek is not the end of challenges, but the ability to inhabit the eye of the hurricane with the certainty that nothing essential can be touched by the passing storm. Your center is unshakable, and your trajectory is being traced by hands that know no error. You realize now that the time you lost trying to fit into alien molds was, in fact, the time needed for you to develop the resilience that now sustains your true identity. The journey ahead no longer demands the weight of justification. You owe nothing to anyone, nor do you need to explain why your rhythm has changed. Simply accept that your calling now requires your full presence, and that your only task is to remain aligned with the voice that whispers in your stillness. You have begun to realize that the tiredness you felt in the early morning hours was not a lack of sleep, but a call to a silent vigil. That isolation you tried to avoid for so long was not a removal from people. It was the preservation of your essence as it was being molded for what is to come. There is a clarity that only emerges when you stop fighting your own nature. And so that you can be certain this recognition is not a coincidence, observe the signs. First, the almost obsessive repetition of certain sequences that cross your path, as if the universe were signaling an access code. Second, the feeling that, although nothing in your routine has changed physically, your perception of every object and every face around you has completely shifted. Third, the sudden disinterest in goals that once seemed vital, replaced by a serene urgency to live something you still cannot name. It is the smallest agreement, but it is real. You operated for years under the dominion of futile effort, believing that survival depended on your ability to bear the weight of the world. You were trying to perform for an audience that was never paying attention, spending energy that should have been saved for your true mission. But look at the ark, your metaphor of protection. During the storm, those inside did not see the flood as destruction, but as necessary isolation, so that the seed of a new lineage could be preserved away from the corruption of the waters. You have been inside that ark, even without understanding why the outside world seems so loud and unreachable. Your current silence is the deck of a ship being guided by invisible currents. Type and come back to me. Someone you see striving harder than everyone around and still seeing doors closed. Someone who walks quietly in a way that no one comprehends. Someone whose face came to your mind just now like a mirror of your own journey. Send this to that person. Not as a recommendation, but as a delivery, a notice that they too are being led. And as you reflect on this, let your like be your wordless amen. Not as a metric, but as a deep agreement that what was named here is the truth of your current moment. Sit with that for a moment. Let it settle into the part of you that waited longest for this confirmation, not as a wish nor as a hope, but as a confirmation of your lineage. The agreement that formed between heaven and your hearing is what will sustain you this season. Type slowly. Feel the strength that emanates as you record this truth. You are committed. You are sent. You are being led. It is sealed. Attention! You need to prepare yourself now. I have prepared material for those who doubt their own calling from God and still do not have confirmation. Are you one of the chosen? We'll give you that clarity. These are the 7 signs of the language of the calling, marks of God in the story of every chosen one, so you can reread your story and recognize the purpose sealed over you before the foundation of the world. Stop calling coincidence what is actually a calling. Stop silencing the sacred restlessness. Stop postponing the answer you feel. Your window is closing, and a chosen one who does not recognize the calling does not walk in purpose. More than 10,000 people have already read the 7 signs and received the conviction they had been seeking for years. They were just like you. They felt something no one understood. They lived in silent doubt, and they discovered it was real. And it had a name. The offer is open only this month. Access the link in the pinned comment now before doubt steals another year from your calling.